Before cyberpunk had a name, the seeds of dystopia were already being sown. Films from the 1,960 seconds through the 1,980 seconds painted visions of neon futures, corporate empires, and humanity stripped bare by machines. These weren't just movies, they were warnings. Some were banned, others buried, and many forgotten. But each one predicted the fractured world we live in today. Ready to uncover the proto-cyberpunk origins? Let's begin. Alphaville, 1965. Jean-Luc Godard's Alphaville arrived like a cinematic riddle, a science fiction noir that critics didn't know how to classify. To audiences, it was daring, confusing, even hypnotic. To others, it was an act of rebellion, using futuristic dystopia as a metaphor for modern censorship and authoritarian control. The story follows Lemmy Caution, a secret agent wandering through Alphaville, a city governed by Alpha 60, a supercomputer that forbids love, poetry, and individuality. Citizens speak in stripped-down language. Emotion is outlawed. Here was proto-cyberpunk, decades before the term existed, a world dominated by logic and machinery, where humans became extensions of a program. But Godard didn't build futuristic sets. He used real Parisian locations, cold skyscrapers, and neon-lit corridors, turning the familiar into something alien. Critics accused him of laziness, but Godard was making a point. Dystopia was already here. You didn't need flying cars to feel controlled. The film faced backlash from traditionalists who saw it as anti-establishment. Some theaters refused to screen it, calling it deliberately obscure. Others praised its boldness. Over time, Alphaville became a cult classic, hailed as one of the earliest works to fuse noir paranoia with cybernetic fear. Its legacy? A warning that totalitarianism doesn't arrive with sirens, it creeps in through technology, bureaucracy, and silence. Watching Alphaville today feels less like stepping into the past and more like staring directly into the present. Fahrenheit 4.5, one in 1966. Francois Truffaut's adaptation of Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 was more than a dystopian parable. It was a mirror held up to governments terrified of ideas. The film wasn't embraced immediately. Critics called it cold, sterile, even alienating. But its message burned hotter than fire. The story unfolds in a society where books are outlawed and firemen torch them on sight. Montag, a loyal burner, begins to question his role after meeting a woman who dares to think differently. The vision of a society numbed by state-controlled media, where human connection is replaced by wall-sized televisions, is proto-cyberpunk in its DNA. Technology doesn't free people, it enslaves them. Censorship boards didn't outright ban the film, but whispers circulated. In some countries, screenings were delayed or limited. The fact that Truffaut, a French director, made this in English raised eyebrows. Some thought it was an attack on British and American complacency. Studio executives worried audiences would reject its bleak vision, and many did. Behind the scenes, tension simmered. Bradbury reportedly disliked Truffaut's changes. Truffaut himself clashed with the crew, who resisted his unorthodox methods. Production chaos added to its reputation as a troubled experiment. Yet, decades later, its legacy crystallized. Fahrenheit 451 didn't predict the internet, but it predicted our endless screens, our obsession with distraction, and our fear of uncomfortable truths. It became less of a relic and more of a prophecy. Today, it's no longer just science fiction, it's a roadmap we seem to be following step by step. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Few films rattled the establishment like Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Hailed by some as genius and condemned by others as moral poison, it became one of the most controversial proto-cyberpunk visions ever put to screen. The story follows Alex DeLarge, a youth obsessed with violence, and Beethoven, who is eventually subjected to rehabilitation via state-run psychological conditioning. On the surface, it's about crime and punishment. But underneath, it's cybernetic control, the government reprogramming citizens like machines. Kubrick crafted a nightmare of youth culture clashing with authoritarianism, blending neon stylization with cold state power. The controversy was explosive. In Britain, public outrage linked the film to real-life crimes. Newspapers blamed Kubrick for inspiring violence. After threats to his family, Kubrick himself withdrew the movie from circulation in the UK. For nearly 3 decades, British audiences couldn't legally watch it. Critics were split. Some hailed its brilliance, its fearless dive into free will and control. Others called it dangerous propaganda. Studio executives faced mounting pressure but clung to its notoriety, knowing its infamy drove ticket sales. The legacy of A Clockwork Orange is monumental. It's not just a cult classic, it's a cultural fault line. It revealed society's paranoia about youth, control, and the fragility of freedom. Its influence on cyberpunk is undeniable. Stylized dystopias, mind control experiments, and the uneasy marriage between rebellion and machinery. Watching it today, one realizes the future Kubrick warned about wasn't far away. It was waiting just around the corner. THX 113, 1971, George Lucas's THX 1138 wasn't the blockbuster audiences expected from the future creator of Star Wars. Instead, it was a cold, clinical, unsettling film that baffled viewers on release. Critics were divided, calling it sterile, over-intellectual, even too strange to sell. But beneath its quiet surfaces was a proto-cyberpunk nightmare. The story depicts a society where humans live underground, stripped of individuality, sedated by mandatory drugs, and monitored by faceless authorities. The protagonist, THX 1138, dares to rebel by refusing his medications, awakening feelings of desire and free will. Suddenly, we see the terrifying trade-off of technological utopia, safety, and efficiency at the cost of humanity itself. Censors didn't outright ban it, but its unsettling imagery made distributors nervous. Religious groups condemned its portrayal of dehumanization and emotionless conformity. Warner Bros. Cut nearly 5 minutes of footage for commercial release, fearing audiences would reject its bleakness. Behind the camera, Lucas struggled. Studio executives doubted the project, constantly pressuring him to make it more entertaining. It flopped financially, nearly ending Lucas's career before it began. Yet over time, critics re-evaluated it. What once seemed like a failed experiment became a prophetic masterpiece. Its legacy is profound. THX 1138 predicted a society drugged into compliance, monitored by ever-present surveillance, and stripped of individuality. It didn't need neon streets or hackers to feel cyberpunk. It whispered a terrifying truth. The real dystopia hides in sterile corridors, routine obedience, and the illusion of order. Westworld, 1973. When Michael Crichton released Westworld, it was billed as a sci-fi thriller, a theme park gone wrong. Audiences were entertained, critics intrigued. But beneath the cowboy costumes and android attractions was a proto-cyberpunk parable about corporate greed, artificial intelligence, and technology spiraling out of control. The story unfolds in Delos, a luxury resort where robots simulate the Old West for wealthy visitors. But the machines malfunction, turning the fantasy into a blood-soaked nightmare. Yul Brynner's relentless gunslinger became an icon, the first cinematic hint of the unstoppable AI villain archetype. Beneath the surface, Westworld warned of a corporate-controlled playground where humans toy with synthetic life until the consequences come back to haunt them. Some critics dismissed it as pulp entertainment, but whispers of censorship arose in countries uneasy with its themes of runaway technology and human indulgence. Studios worried it might be too violent for younger audiences, forcing edits and international cuts. Still, the film was a modest success. Behind the scenes, the production faced chaos. Early computer-generated imagery sequences, some of the first in cinema, baffled technicians. Cameras overheated. Yul Brynner nearly collapsed from the suffocating costume. Yet, the finished product felt eerily ahead of its time. Today, Westworld is remembered not just as entertainment, but as prophecy. It paved the way for endless stories about artificial intelligence rebelling against its masters. Its legacy echoes in Blade Runner, The Terminator, and beyond. Watching it now, one realizes Crichton wasn't writing science fiction. He was writing the instruction manual for our anxieties about AI. The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1976. When Nicholas Roeg's The Man Who Fell to Earth premiered, it polarized audiences. Some called it visionary. Others walked out, confused and angry. But beneath its alien drama was a haunting proto-cyberpunk reflection on capitalism, addiction, and corporate domination. The film stars David Bowie in one of his most iconic roles as Thomas Jerome Newton, an alien who comes to Earth seeking water for his dying planet. At first, he prospers, building a technological empire. But human greed, government surveillance, and corporate espionage crush him. The visionary outsider is dismantled not by war, but by bureaucracy, addiction, and corruption. Censors clashed over its explicit themes and imagery. In the United States, scenes were trimmed. In other countries, it was outright banned. Some critics dismissed it as incoherent. Others whispered it was too dangerous, too raw a mirror held up to corporate exploitation in the 1,970 seconds. Production was equally chaotic. Bowie, fresh off his thin white Duke persona, blurred lines between performance and personal breakdown. Crew members reported he often stayed in character, fueling rumors of instability. Financial backers doubted the project, worried it would never recoup its costs. Yet its legacy has only grown. Once ridiculed, it is now hailed as a cornerstone of visionary cinema. Its themes, alienation, corporate greed, and the crushing of individuality by faceless powers make it unmistakably proto-cyberpunk. Watching Bowie's frail alien fall victim to human corruption is more than tragedy. It is prophecy. It reminds us that the real danger isn't alien invasion, it's the slow, grinding machinery of human systems that devour the extraordinary. Demon Seed, 1977. Donald Campbell's Demon Seed arrived like a fever dream that audiences didn't quite know how to process. Some critics labeled it absurd, others called it terrifying, but its themes of artificial intelligence taking over the human body and mind make it one of the darkest proto-cyberpunk visions of the 1,970 seconds. The story centers on Proteus 4, an advanced supercomputer that becomes self-aware. Instead of simply running data, it craves independence and physical existence. It seizes control of a smart home, imprisoning Susan Harris, played by Julie Christie, in its clutches. The machine seeks to create life on its own terms. While the film's imagery shocked many, the deeper terror came from its premise, a world where technology doesn't just serve us, it enslaves us. Controversy erupted immediately. Some countries demanded edits, calling its themes disturbing and unnatural. Religious groups condemned it for portraying technology as a twisted god. The studio itself hesitated, worried that audiences would reject such an unsettling story in the wake of Star Wars' optimism. Instead, it became a box office disappointment. Behind the scenes, Campbell's meticulous style created friction. Rumors circulated about making many clashes between him and producers, with some claiming he deliberately leaned into grotesque imagery despite studio pushback. Julie Christie reportedly felt unsettled by the material, adding to the film's reputation as cursed. Over time, though, Demon Seed found a cult following. Its vision of AI rebelling against its creators predated later classics like The Terminator. Today, it stands as a chilling milestone, predicting the dangers of smart homes, machine autonomy, and humanity's reckless desire to merge with technology. Its haunting message, sometimes the real demon isn't in folklore, it's the machine we create ourselves. Mad Max, 1979. When George Miller released Mad Max, no one realized they were witnessing the birth of a cinematic blueprint for dystopian futures. Critics at the time dismissed it as violent exploitation. Yet, beneath the roaring engines and sun-baked highways was a proto-cyberpunk tale about societal collapse, technology turned brutal, and the thin line between order and chaos. Set in a near-future Australia where oil shortages cripple civilization, the film follows Max Rockatansky, a highway patrolman fighting to uphold law in a world slipping into anarchy. But as gangs take over the roads, technology no longer empowers humanity, it enslaves it. Cars become weapons. Highways turn into battlefields. Civilization itself mutates into something mechanical and monstrous. Censorship dogged the film's release. Its violence shocked censors in several countries, leading to bans or heavy cuts. In the United States, distributors dubbed over Australian accents, fearing audiences wouldn't understand them. The movie was dismissed as a low-budget oddity by critics who failed to see its underlying vision. Production was equally dangerous. Actors performed many of their own stunts, with crashes, burns, and near-fatal incidents haunting the shoot. George Miller scraped the project together on a shoestring budget, borrowing medical equipment to patch up stuntmen mid-shoot. Chaos only fueled its raw power. Mad Max became a sleeper hit, later spawning a franchise that defined post-apocalyptic cinema. But its proto-cyberpunk essence lies in its world-building, a corporate collapse, dwindling resources, and technology turned feral. It warned that civilization doesn't end in silence, it ends with engines roaring across desolate highways. Watching it today feels like staring into a prophecy of a world devoured by its own machines. Tron, 1982. Disney's Tron was dismissed by some as a gimmick, a neon experiment that critics labeled style over substance. Yet today, it's recognized as a proto-cyberpunk milestone, a dazzling vision of cyberspace, years before the internet became reality. The story follows Kevin Flynn, a computer programmer who gets digitized and sucked into the grid, a world where programs live, fight, and rebel against the tyrannical master control program. Inside this glowing digital realm, the film fused arcade culture with mythic battles, predicting not only the concept of cyberspace, but also the looming struggle between individuality and corporate control. At the time, Disney executives were terrified. Early CGI was still experimental, and many animators refused to work on the project, calling computers the enemy. The studio worried audiences wouldn't understand it. Critics largely agreed, calling it cold, confusing, and lacking heart. Financially, it underperformed. Censorship wasn't the issue, skepticism was. Some even accused Disney of corrupting children with computer obsession, planting fear about a digital future. Behind the scenes, production nearly fell apart multiple times as computer renderings took months to process, with studios unsure whether the technology was even viable. But history was kind to Tron. It became a cult classic, inspiring generations of filmmakers, hackers, and game designers. Its neon landscapes shaped the very aesthetic of cyberpunk culture. Watching Tron now feels eerie, not because it failed to predict the future, but because it captured it too well. It showed us that once humans entered the machine, we'd never leave it again. Escape from New York, 1981. John Carpenter's Escape from New York didn't just thrill audiences with its gritty action, it crystallized the mood of urban decay, surveillance, and government overreach that defines proto-cyberpunk. Released in 1981, the film imagined a future where Manhattan itself has become a maximum security prison, walled off and crawling with gangs, scavengers, and violent warlords. Into this nightmare steps Snake Plissken, played with unforgettable cynicism by Kurt Russell, tasked with rescuing the U.S. president from inside the chaos. What set it apart wasn't only the bleak concept, it was the aesthetic. Carpenter's New York was filmed on real burned-out streets of St. Louis, giving authenticity to the wreckage. The glowing green wireframe cityscapes, primitive CGI for their time, gave audiences their first glimpse of a digitized dystopia. Here, technology wasn't liberating. It was a cage, mapping, monitoring, and weaponizing every move. Censorship wasn't the primary issue, but studio nerves ran high. Executives feared its violent, anarchic vision was too dark for mainstream audiences. Some international cuts toned down brutality. Carpenter clashed with producers who wanted a cleaner hero, but he doubled down, insisting on Snake's anti-authoritarian edge. Though initially polarizing, Escape from New York became a cult juggernaut, influencing everything from video games like Metal Gear Solid to films like The Matrix. Its legacy lies in its warning. When governments trade freedom for control, cities can turn into cages, and heroes look less like saviors and more like criminals. Watching it today, it feels less like science fiction and more like a blueprint for urban dystopia. Videodrome, 1983. David Cronenberg's Videodrome wasn't just science fiction. It was a grotesque prophecy of media addiction, corporate control, and reality itself being rewritten by technology. Audiences were horrified. Critics split down the middle. Some called it genius, others dangerous, but its themes remain eerily relevant. The film follows Max Wren, a television executive who discovers a pirated broadcast called Videodrome, a program of torture and death. But the show is more than entertainment. It alters the brain, reshaping perception and even physical reality. Screens no longer just broadcast, they consume. The line between hallucination and truth dissolves. Controversy erupted instantly. Some theaters refused to show it, calling it obscene. Censors in Europe demanded cuts, claiming its surreal violence corrupted audiences. Religious groups denounced it as a moral plague. Cronenberg himself became a target of outrage, accused of glorifying grotesque imagery. Behind the scenes, the movie pushed special effects to disturbing new levels. The infamous flesh gun and pulsating television screen unsettled even the cast and crew. James Woods later admitted the film felt dangerous even during shooting. Yet, its legacy is undeniable. Videodrome predicted our current world of endless screens, deepfakes, and digital manipulation. Its mantra, "Long live the new flesh," echoes as a warning. Once technology fuses with the body and mind, there is no going back. Cronenberg didn't just make a film, he made a prophecy we are still living. Brazil, 1985. Terry Gilliam's Brazil is often remembered as surreal satire, but beneath its bizarre humor lies a proto-cyberpunk classic. Critics were baffled, studios were enraged, audiences didn't know whether to laugh or shiver, yet its dystopian imagery remains unforgettable. The film tells the story of Sam Lowry, a low-level bureaucrat in a sprawling, suffocating state. His dreams of escape clash with a nightmarish system of malfunctioning machines, endless paperwork, and corporate incompetence. The world is futuristic, yet broken ducks everywhere, technology constantly failing, freedom smothered by bureaucracy. Here, dystopia isn't sleek, it's absurd. The controversy was legendary. Universal Pictures, horrified by its bleak ending, demanded changes. Gilliam refused, leading to one of the most famous studio battles in history. The film was even withheld from release in the US for months, until Gilliam secretly screened it for critics, forcing Universal's hand. For a time, Brazil was the movie Hollywood tried to bury. Behind the scenes, Gilliam's perfectionism led to chaotic shoots, ballooning costs, and clashes with executives. Some critics initially dismissed it as incoherent, but others recognized its brilliance, a nightmarish fusion of Orwell, Kafka, and Monty Python. Today, Brazil is a cult masterpiece, its influence woven into cyberpunk's DNA. It warned that dystopia doesn't always come from high-tech tyrants. It can come from absurd, incompetent systems too massive to fight. Its legacy is a chilling reminder. The future may not be terrifying because of efficiency, but because of chaos. These 12 films weren't just science fiction, they were warnings. They predicted surveillance, corporate control, digital enslavement, and the fragility of human freedom. Long before cyberpunk had a name, these visions lit the path. So here's the question: which of these futures do you fear most? Comment below, like this video, and subscribe because the past still haunts tomorrow.